Hello, welcome back to the YouTube channel of Bethel Evangelical Free Church Hanley. I'm Pastor Gervais Charnley. This is another historic church in Leicestershire. This is the Church of St Guthlac, Stathern. Again, that's a Norse name, Stathern, and Guthlac was as his name suggests, also of Norse origins. He was in fact a local noble, born probably 7th century or so, and he lived a rather wild life as a young man before around the age of 24 becoming a monk and entering the monastery at Repton. He later on he became a hermit at Crowland in the Fens, and Crowland Abbey is dedicated to him and is essentially, it traces its foundation back to him, although what precisely he found is another matter because he was a hermit. The church, of course, is dedicated to him because he's a local lad, but the fact he has an Anglo-Saxon dedication suggests an Anglo-Saxon origin, although nothing of the present building is Anglo-Saxon. There are 12th century bits and pieces. It's mostly 14th century. There's a massive rebuild at the time, as with so many churches in this area. The building has again been massively Victorianed, wall plaster's been taken off, that sort of thing, but it remains, like so many of these buildings, an interesting structure. The Victorian restoration is one of the more sort of moderate ones, which leaves you kind of, was it worthwhile, as opposed to the ones where there's been a massive amount of work. This is just, well, we wanted to make it look a bit more the way other churches around here do, and you're left thinking, well, yes, but why? But before I start moaning about that, or before I keep on moaning about that rather, let's have a look around the building. As usual, then we start at the west end, which here does mean in the tower. The font, I haven't been able to find the light switch in the tower. Clearly there is lighting in here, so it's a bit gloomy, but you can just see the dark outline of the font with its Victorian cover. And out then into the nave, aisle either side, both same date, same style of column. Here's the front end of the font. You can see carved with tracery. This is a fairly common 14th century into the 15th century style. There's Union banner at the back. They have had a fairly major restoration. Recently they need to do even more just because it's an old building. It's showing its age. The organ, which is a nice little old-fashioned organ case. And there we have one of these big Victorian stone pulpits. And it was something of a thing with a lot of Victorian architects, and not always the most appropriate thing to have. But there we are. Chancel, here we have that low-pitched roof, so beloved of the 15th century. The chancel is extended around 1300, and there we have altar at the east end and Victorian window where we've got St Guthlac for, of course, this church. We've got St Peter, the Virgin Mary, and St Hugh of Lincoln, because of course Leicester Diocese didn't exist back then, so it was Lincoln Diocese. Leicester Diocese, very modern. And here is Feed My Sheep. There's the piscina. It's quite a simple building. We have got this memorial here. You can see black marble, and it's the Reverend Richard Cook. Who's a noted theologian of his day. 1704 though. So very few noted theologians back then are well known anymore, but he was a man of some ability. And there we have, looking west. Here we have a memorial to the Reverend Thomas Park, who was here for 60 years and is buried in Stamford. Died 1832, aged 85. So basically he would have spent his entire ministry after doing a curacy here as the rector. And I say here, there's always the question, how long did he actually spend in the parish? because it's not always as long as the man was rector, and partly because he's 85 when he dies. Well, it's very possible that he really wasn't up to it by the end, and he therefore retires almost. But they had no pension in those days, so he'd have to effectively employ somebody else. Here we have the war memorial, a thing like these brass ones. It is a little bit, as you can see, discoloured. There have been bats and things, which of course that's bats for you. So that's, you can see here one of the older windows, just the simple lancers, and they've been opened up later on. So that is the inside of St Guthlac's here in Stathern. So here we are now outside of St Guthlac. The ground slopes, I'm having to just bend over a bit just to fit in the frame as well as most of the church. Very typical of the area. It's one of the larger examples of this typical English parish church: tower, aisled nave, chancel. So we'll have a look around the outside before my knees give out. There we are. So further on St Guthlac, he's born around 675, and according to the stories, he's a warrior, he's a noble, but he ends up falling with some bad companions who decide to make him effectively the leader of a group of thugs who are terrorising the neighbourhood. Except, of course, when your young thugs are nobles, then how far is that just what nobles sometimes did anyway? But no. So chancel and the lower part of the walls are about 1300, and you can see there one of the houses in, I believe it's still a big village, not a small town. It's hard to tell sometimes. It's a nice window there, that's sort of 16th, 17th century, I expect, given the style. Round to the north side, there's a north porch. Note that whacking great buttress. That is, of course, not a decorative buttress, that is support, because sometimes things start leaning over, and you don't want that, because eventually they end up falling over. North porch, both porches are used. The church is open during the day, accessible, has outside lows. You can see there's the porch here, and the porch, north porch benches have recently been restored. It's important to have them. Most churches had benches. Some were wooden, many would have been stone like these. There's the tower, towering over the whole thing at the gargoyles, and they are gargoyles because they are water spouts. Old rectory. It's very common to find these big houses because the rector was a gentleman. He was also expected to be able to put up the bishop if the bishop came to visit, so he needed the spare rooms for that. And round to the south side, which typically is historically would have been where the main burial ground was. The Middle Ages, they didn't tend to bury on the north unless they really couldn't help it, because there were views as to what that was suitable for. So that's the south porch. You can see this is slightly grander than the north side, and that is St Guthlac's Stathern. And so there we have it, St Guthlac's Stathern. Well, thank you for watching, and may God bless you and keep you until next time. And unlike Guthlac, don't fall into bad company while you're young. Bye-bye.